just talking about music and healing, and your work and research at Cambridge is all around this, and it struck me it's really extraordinary. You were talking about, at one point your dissertation was around Coltrane, and we took that very seriously and deeply, and really wanted to understand the whole life of this particular person. And it's interesting, I guess, different forms of music seem to evoke different kind of things, and jazz is, I guess, for music, it's so rich, and beboppers, there seems to be so much stuff that often was going on for lots of these people. Lots of these people seem to have quite full-on kind of lives. There are other types of music that people often seem to be drawn to, that people might relate far more naturally, perhaps, to think about them being healing. Certain types of classical music, Mozart and so on. But yet we know jazz seems to have all sorts of different effects. So tell me a little bit about what was it about jazz that speaks to you? And tell me a little bit about, again, from your research, if you've got feelings about different types of music, and if they play with us differently.
Sure, yeah. For me, the process of jazz and the process of improvisation from a personal level, listening to it and playing it as well, was able to get me into a space where I was very much in the present, where there was a equal balance of kind of past and future, but there was a direct line in the present, and at those moments there's a feeling of, sometimes people refer it to as a spiritual type of experience, others kind of just say that they're in the flow or they're in the pocket. So based on what your values and beliefs are, you'll have different terms for it, but this feeling is kind of the space where you almost, or I felt almost, most alive, most present, most aware. And with research and with emotions, everybody has varied music preferences. They tend to like music in general differently, and also in different
So one person might like rock, generally, and one person might like classical, one person might like R&B, and one person might like this, or country, or folk, or
and you could almost put them in this room. You could put them in separate rooms and have them listen to different types of music, and you could almost look in without even hearing the music and see them both maybe bopping their heads and reacting almost in the same way, or feeling sometimes the same or similar emotions. And the other interesting thing is listening to music when you're in different moods or different contexts. So if you're in the gym, you might listen to a different type of music than when you're just like after a day's work.
Or if you're going out for an evening out, you might listen to a different piece of music. And if you're working from home and trying to get something done. So it's interesting, this relationship that we have, that we all seem to have with music. And some people, I guess it seems to be quite overt, including obviously people who are musicians and so on, but all sorts of people who may not call themselves music at all. But music is really important to them. It might just be in terms of them going out and having a great time, or that they just are a serious collector of particular stuff, or what have you. It's really interesting that music seems to be something that's really, really powerful for us. Tell me a little bit about, I guess one of the things that, whilst we seem to know that music is really important in many of our lives, and it's the backdrop of our lives, the thing about healing still isn't something that we necessarily talk about that much, really, if you think about it. We sometimes kind of think about music, we put on mood music, somebody's trying to swoon somebody, or before what they're going out, or dancing, or dance music. But healing in music, I guess, is something that we kind of have heard of and so on, but it's not as mainstreamed as so on. And then it's interesting, you talked about interesting between psychotherapy and music and so on. Tell me a little bit about this area and where you feel that we are in this area about music and healing and applying music and healing. What's your take on that?
I think there's a lot of reservations. People don't necessarily want to say that music can heal. There's kind of these pop words, music can create peace, and music and healing. They kind of get twisted in music and well-being, and music and decreasing stereotypes. So there's all these different terms that can be used, and there's debate over whether or not it's how long-term the effects or how short-term the effects. But, for example, I was giving, right now I'm asking participants to respond to questions about what's the meaning of music in your life, what's the importance of it. And we're collecting data from Pakistan and the Czech Republic, Japan, here in the UK and the US, and almost across the board there's deep, deep meaning, and people are responding tons, and the things where music is my savior, it's a thing that I listen to, it complements my emotions. I mean, you could get a sense that it has a deep meaning, And where the healing comes in, it's not entirely clear yet what that means. Is it only short term? Is it more of a cognitive thing where there's chemicals that are released, and that's kind of the force behind it, or is it connecting with our stories and who we are, and are we identifying senses of ourselves with it? So it's still.
But that in itself seems to be really beautiful. I mean, and I love the sound of this particular piece of research, isn't it? That I'm from all over the world, and people are just responding. You know, what's the meaning of music? And they're just writing reams, sounds like, of stuff about that. I think it's really it's just really extraordinary, isn't it? I know a case of, I think, somebody I know and who knew somebody who. Someone who's close, I think a family member was quite unwell, and he spoke to the nurses and so on involved, and among other things played some music that was looked to have a healing effect. I think it was the healing of Mozart, and it had a real marked effect on them. And he's very mindful about what kind of sounds and tones and all the rest of that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting, this whole particular area. I think when we come back in a second, I'm really keen to kind of explore a little bit about musicians and healers, and Ben, who's behind the camera, is also a musician, so it might be, Ben might also have something to say at some point about that, but it's really interesting about music and healers. I think one of the things that really struck me as a coach, for example, just before we break and before we come back, is that one of the reasons I became a coach was that I was on my journey as a singer, and I met so many singers who struggle with musical life or career or whatever, and many of them had stopped or paused, and I found that I often found that lots of creative people are a little bit all over the place, or lots all over the place, and that they didn't realise the power of their creativity and didn't allow that pour into actually their life or into how they manage their careers. So if they could, that could be very profound. Often that they didn't often get the healing from their particular work. So it'd be really interesting to explore some of that with you and your thoughts on that and so on. So let's pause it there.